Good.
I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this evening's meeting. This is the 16th meeting of the year for the City Board of Directors right here at City Hall. We'll begin with an invocation by Doug Jones, and I'll lead the pledge. All rise.
Let's pray. Our Father and our God, we thank you for the privilege you've given us to have us born in America, where we can take and do things freely and openly in such a way that you could be glorified and we can govern ourselves. We thank you for the fact that you put it in your word that we would be governed by a body of representatives. And Father, you have made it possible for this nation for so many years to be able to live under this standard. We pray that you'll continue to watch over us, guide us, and direct us as we go forward. For this body, Lord, I just pray for wisdom. I pray that you'll give them wisdom beyond their years, help them to be able to make decisions, even sometimes when they're tough decisions, and to stand firm on those things which are right in your sight. I pray, Father, that you'll give guidance tonight, that you'll give clarity of thought, clarity of communication, in such a way that that decision will be made. And even if we agree to disagree, we'll be able to disagree with harmony, with a clear understanding of what's going on. Once again, watch over this board. May you guide and direct in everything that's said and done. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I didn't turn my phone.
We'll call this meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Director Aaron Holliday. Here. Director Elaine Jones.
Here.
Director Marcia Dobbs-Smith.
Here.
Director Carol Weatherford.
Here.
Director Karen Garcia.
Here.
Director Steve Trusty.
Here.
Mayor Pat McCabe.
Here. At this time, we'll consider the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions to the agenda, or items to be moved from consent agenda to new business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion.
Director Trusty, seconded by Director Garcia. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Agenda is approved. Now we'll consider the approval of the minutes of the regularly scheduled meeting of August 2nd, 2022. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Director Dobbs-Smith, seconded by Director Jones. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Recognition of guests is Sarah Richardson here. I don't see you, Sarah. We have a proclamation that we wanted to present to the Garland County Literacy Council and Executive Director Sarah Richardson. And it reads as follows: City Hot Springs Literacy Month. Whereas literacy is the ability to understand, evaluate, use, and engage with written text to participate in society, achieves one's goals, develops one's knowledge and potential. Literacy can mean the difference between a life well lived in hardship. And whereas 43 million adults struggle in America with literacy in basic math, and 20 million immigrants are not proficient in speaking English. And whereas according to the 2018 Program for International Assessment of Adult Competencies, 20% of adults in Garland County struggle with low literacy and 31% with low numeracy. And whereas the number of indicator of a child's reading ability is the reading ability of a child's mother, outweighing factors such as income and school district. And whereas workers aged 25 and over who have less education than a high school diploma had the highest unemployment rate, 5.4%, the lowest median weekly earnings, $592 in 2019, among those all education levels. And whereas for every dollar spent on educational programs in correctional facilities, an estimated $5 is saved in reincarnation costs. And whereas nationally less than 10% of adults in need of improved literacy are receiving services, and whereas 28 million adults in the U.S. lack the basic digital skills needed to use a computer. Yet most are using computers every day on the job, making the need to invest in digital literacy to ensure a competitive workforce. Now therefore, I, Pat McCabe, Mayor of the City of Hot Springs, on behalf of the Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim September 2022 as Literacy Month in Hot Springs, Arkansas. In witness whereof I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the city to be affixed on this first day of September in the year of our Lord, 2022. And if Sarah was here, we would have presented this to her, so we'll make sure that she gets this. Now we'll move to the city manager's report. Mr. Bill Burrow.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start off with an event that's actually coming up August 24th at 2 p.m. at Hotel Hot Springs. It's the Eclipse, the Path of Totality. It's a free event open to the public, and Hot Springs National Park is one of 2 national parks directly in the Path of Totality. Individuals attending will learn what to expect and how to be ready for the total eclipse that will take place on April 8th, 2024. This presentation will be by Kim Williams of the state of Arkansas. And what we've seen in other areas that have gone through totality, millions of people flock to these areas. And of course, it's coming through a large band in Arkansas, so we expect to have thousands of people attending here in Hot Springs that maybe would not have been here before. And to hear the talks, it could be hundreds of thousands. So we have to start preparing for that now, even though it's 2022. In 2 years, that time will be here, and we're learning as much as we can about it. I know that Visit Hot Springs has been very involved, and look forward to this presentation. I want to thank everyone who joined us in person and virtually on Facebook for our 2 recent groundbreaking ceremonies by our Parks and Trails Department. We broke ground on the next phase of the Hot Springs Creek Greenway Trail on Thursday, August the 4th. This phase will be a 1-mile extension from where the trail currently ends there on the other side of Golf Links Bridge and go all the way down to TV Hill Road. The groundbreaking for Phase 1 of Velocity Park, the Bicycle Skills Park, was on Wednesday, August the 10th. This phase will include the asphalt pump track and a natural surface trail encircling the track. So a lot of great work happening in our parks and trails, and we want to thank our friends of the park who have always been there to help us with these efforts. Lake Ouachita Water Supply Project. After the article in the paper the other day, I've had some calls on that and have talked to several, but want to make sure that the board realize where we are in that particular project. If a board approves the contract for tonight, the entire 17 miles of the raw water transmission main will be under contract and on construction. Status updates of the 5 contracts currently, or contract 1 is completed last July by Belt Construction of Texarkana, and that's taking it from the intake site to the existing Ouachita treatment plant, which is 2.3 miles. As you know, August 23rd is the date where we'll actually start into the mountain of the intake. Contract 2, clearing and grubbing, started last week by Belt Construction of Texarkana, 2 sections. Mazarn Creek to Airport Road along Northmore Road and Ouachita Water Treatment to the Lake Hamilton. That's scheduled for completion in June of 2023. That's a 4.2 mile section. Contract 3, they're currently boring under Albert Pike, 270 West, which is all that is left as far as construction. Should be complete by the end of next month. McKee Utility Contractors from Prague, Oklahoma, Upper Lake Hamilton to Timberlake Drive near Mazarn Creek is the rest of that. That's 5.5 miles. Contract 4, pending board approval tonight. That's the fixed price design build contract with Michaels, who are also doing the intake boring, which will begin a kickoff meeting next Friday. Michaels Trenchless of Brownsville, they'll be doing the lake crossings of Lake Hamilton and Mazarn Creek. That's about a half mile. That's a $14 million contract, one of which we weren't planning at the beginning of this phase, but had to satisfy others that are involved in the lakes to make sure that we were able to cross. We are going to float and sink the main Lake Hamilton portion, but we do have to bore under Mazarn Creek, and I'm sure in the presentation tonight you'll get what those exact figures are for each one of those. Contract 5 is 300 feet, is all K-Jax contractors of North Little Rock. About 300 feet is all they have left to complete in contract 5. It should be complete by the end of next month. This is Airport Road following Pittman Road to the new water treatment plant site on Randall Road off of Amity, about 4.5 miles. So that's 17 miles throughout the entire project that we'll have under construction, or at least in that process of being bid and awarded. I mentioned the $14 million on the lake crossings. Another something that we didn't expect was the amount that the plant came in at. We had anticipated that to be somewhere around 24 to 28 million. The bids opened up at 34 to 38 million. It was the lowest bid of the ones received, and I think the highest was 54 million. These were, you know, I've had, how could you miss that by 10 million? Well, when we designed this project, these numbers were based on pre-COVID dollars. COVID hit about 2 weeks later, and what we've seen in the industry throughout the state of Arkansas and others is even since January of this year, these prices have really escalated, and we're seeing that in projects all over the state. I don't think anyone at that point could have anticipated what we've seen in the market, what we've seen in supply issues, what we've seen in inflation. So that's really the bulk of this overrun. Staff is currently working on options to bring back to this board on how we may be able to move this project forward, and some more information on that will be forthcoming. But I did want to state that you know, we live in a different world post-COVID, and we're starting to see that now in these projects. Finally, I wanted to mention, we want to promote our water meter customer portal. There's never a better time to go in and take advantage of the free water meter customer portal that we have that will help residents or those on the system keep up with their water usage. A small percentage of our customers currently are on the system. On the portal dashboard, users quickly see their usage in gallons, not their bill, but their usage, and that relates to what will be becoming your bill. And it can also help them save money and conserve water. They're able to find leaks a lot sooner than what they may. There's a link at www.cityhs.net/UBS. Go to our utility billing service under the city's website and take advantage of signing up for that portal. You can set parameters on there to where if your water usage goes over a certain amount, it'll send you an alert to make you aware of that. So we want to continue to promote that great tool. Paving program, we've just wrapped up our 2021 paving program and have started our 2022 list. Recently, with several city roadways being resurfaced, those include Palmetto Street from Silver to Crescent. That's over by the Langston Elementary, and we've got that done right before school started. McClendon Street, Summit Street, Laurel Street from Spring to Reserve, and then Vine Street from East Grand to Mound. And we'll continue with that 2022 list the remainder of the year. Finally, want to let everyone know that our 2 police officers were nominated, and we had 2 police officers nominated and awarded the Officer of the Year for 2022 from the Arkansas Association of Chiefs of Police. Officer Stephen Perot and former Officer James Moore were nominated and will receive the award on September 28th at 6:30 p.m. at the State House Convention Center. Perot and Moore intervened in the active shooter situation at the Hot Springs High School graduation, and their quick actions saved lives that night. It was great police work and heroic beyond words. These gentlemen certainly deserve that. They did not run away from the fire, they ran into that fire, and they definitely saved some lives. So great to see them recognized for that. Want to thank our Chief of Police, Chris Chapman, for nominating them and his staff. Just really overall great police work. Mayor, that completes my report.
Very good, thank you. At this time, we'll hear from directors of announcements of upcoming events. Directors have any upcoming events they'd like the public to be aware of? Director Garcia.
Yes, I would like to remind the public that we do have coming up October 4th through 8th, 11th through 13th, and the 15th, the Hills to Hammers Women's Build for Habitat for Humanity. They are seeking sponsors if anybody wants to help with a sponsorship, but mostly we need volunteers that will help with this women's build for Habitat for Humanity housings that will be working on 2 different houses for low income, and the recipients of these houses are going to be working as well. And I would love for anyone interested to let me know that I need 8 more people on my team for this event. And it is won't cost anything for you to participate as a volunteer, and you get a lunch on the day that you volunteer. Also, I wanted to remind the residents in Files Road and the Beverly Hills neighborhood I'm sponsoring and hosting a neighborhood meeting for them, and this is some specific issues to that area on September 7th, beginning at 5 p.m. And this will be at the Marriott Courtyard Meeting Room that is right there off Files Road. And to make it as convenient as possible for these residents. And the city manager and representatives from the police department, neighborhood services, and some specific city management that will be there to help address some of their specific issues. And we're happy to do that for this neighborhood and any neighborhood in Hot Springs. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other announcements by directors?
I forgot mine.
Mayor, if I could, left this off. Last but certainly not least, want to recognize and congratulate Director Steve Trusty. He was recently appointed to the Arkansas Municipal League's Advisory Council for Economic Development for 2022 and 2023.
Hey.
The purpose of the Advisory Council is to allow cities of similar size to get together, discuss the mutual problems, and advise the league staff and their executive committee as to the types of services and policies they would like for the league to pursue. A very important committee, and just want to congratulate you for serving on the Economic Development Council for the league.
Thank you. Very good. If there's no further announcements, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are of a routine nature that do not merit individual discussion, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Director Garcia, second by Director Trusty. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consent agenda is adopted. We have a number of items under new business. We're gonna probably, should we hold off on item 3 in hopes that the auditors will come?
Mayor, perhaps we can hold that as the last item.
Last
on
item.
business.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to item 4. At this time, we'll consider resolution R22-126 and ask the city attorney to read by title.
Resolution R-22-126, a resolution declaring a certain structure located at 706 Summer Street a nuisance and condemning same pursuant to Title 17 of the Hot Springs Code. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion, second to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Director Weatherford, seconded by
Second.
Director Jones. And Mr. Mike Scott, Chief Building Official, will provide a report.
Thank you, Mayor. 706 Summer Street, there are 2 structures on this parcel. However, at this time, we are asking to condemn only the garage apartment. Neighborhood Services had a case file on this structure dating back to 2006. In April of 21, it was determined that both of the structures were vacant and wide open, and the case file was updated at that time. The property was owned by Miss Ophelia Tarango, who passed away in August of last year. The will has been probated and the heirs notified via certified mail, and we have received those verifications. Dangerous issues of this property include weak, sagging, and rotten floors in the apartment, which is upstairs of the garage. Weak and improperly installed stairway to the apartment, broken and missing windows and doors, outdated or missing plumbing and electrical components, and there are currently no liens on this property.
continue, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
You're all
Are
good.
there
Any questions of Mr. Scott? Director Garcia?
Is the second structure in compliance?
No, ma'am. But if we tear this one down and it makes the other one a little bit more appealing, that maybe they can get somebody to buy it or fix it up, and then we won't have to tear down both.
So you're allowing some more
Right,
time
and there's also a
there.
rule about tearing down two structures in the same block. We have to do asbestos testing and stuff, which costs us a lot more. So we try to not tear down two structures in a single block in a year. So try to save the city money that way, so.
Any additional questions for Mike? Thank you. Anybody sign up from the audience?
No, sir.
No? Any discussion amongst directors? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Director Holliday? Aye. Jones?
Aye.
Dobbs Smith?
Aye.
Weatherford?
Aye.
Garcia? Aye. Trustee?
Aye.
Mayor McCabe?
Aye. Resolution is adopted. At this time, we'll consider Resolution R-22-127 and ask the city attorney to read by title.
Resolution R-22-127, a resolution awarding a fixed-price contract to Michael's Trenchless, a division of Michael's Corporation for the design and construction services in Contract 4 of the Lake Ouachita Water Supply Intake Project. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Director Weatherford, seconded by
Second.
Director Garcia. And Todd Pillar, Engineering Project Manager, will provide the staff report. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a fixed-price design-build contract, Contract 4, which is our lake crossings that Bill mentioned in his city manager's report. The first crossing is the Lake Hamilton crossing, which is about 1,400 to 1,500 feet. That'll be a float and sink construction method, and it is about $4 million of the $14 million. And then the other crossing is under Mazarin Creek, which will be a micro tunnel. Very similar process to what we're doing with the intake structure, but it was right at $10 million. Staff selected Michael's, just like we did for the intake structure and tunnel. We sent out 3 firms, RFPs, Bradshaw Construction, Garney, Garver, and Michael's. But we only got 2 back. And we did per the RFP instructions, we did a rate and rank process and determined that Michael's would be the most suitable one to do this project. But during negotiations with Michael's, we came up with some I'm going to call them value engineering ideas that saved about $1 million on our price tag of our project. The Michael's original RFP price that they turned in was $14,913,387. And with our value engineering items, we got down to an even $14 million. And of course, this will come from the board-approved 2020 water bond funds.
Very good. Any questions of Todd? Director Garcia?
Just to reiterate, I know at the agenda meeting you mentioned this, but for the public and those in attendance, this is a fixed price, so no change orders, no.
No escalation, no
this is
escalation, no
it.
change. Yeah, it's a fixed
No,
price.
okay.
Yeah,
We
it's just
would-
like our intake, the fixed price design build. We have our intake, which is $19,270,000 with Michael's. It's done. It's fixed price.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments?
I'd just love to hear a little bit about float and sink. I'd love to be able to talk about that, but I don't think I could. Todd?
If you would like, I can send you an email that'll show you a YouTube video exactly how it's done.
Shouldn't take you very long. Just explain that real quick for the public.
Okay, so what they do is they take our 42-inch steel pipe and they coat it with 6 inches of concrete on the outside, which is ballast, right? Because as you put pipe out in the water, even though it's heavy, it's going to be like a cork. So they're going to send it out in the water, but they build it on land. So they're going to use I believe this is correct, they're going to use the east bank, the flatter bank, to build this 42-inch structure, which is nothing more than a pipe. Then they'll use slings and they'll use barges and set it across the lake. But prior to that, they'll excavate on each bank, and they'll put, I'm gonna call them, we call them chairs, big, huge concrete chairs, like you see you've seen them out at the tertiary filters, out at the wastewater plant. The board has been out there. The big chairs we have that support big pipes, they'll put those in the bottom of the lake, and they'll set that pipe, when they sink it, they'll set it on that chair, and then they take big concrete chairs and put on top for more ballast. But the concrete protects the steel casing from the water. It's gonna be underwater for the lifetime. So then after they do that, what they'll do is they have to put test ports, because the Arkansas Health Department makes you test to make sure you don't have it, even though we're taking Lake Washita water and putting it under Lake Hamilton. It's both raw water. But the health department made us put test ports in just to make sure that we don't have any leaks. So it's a real simple process, but it's going to require many, many pieces of big equipment.
When they float it out and they fill it with water, it sinks.
It sinks. Yeah, it's kind of like it's funny. Not to go on a different subject, but when we drill our tunnel, and when we go into the lake bottom of Lake Washita, right? When we get out there 200 feet, it acts like a cork. Even though, remember the machine that was in front of City Hall weighed 80,000 pounds? When it gets out there in the water, it wants to float like a cork. So when we drill into the lake, we'll drill a huge mound of B2 rock, which is about the size of a softball. And then the divers will go down and they'll release the bolts and flood it, shut the bulkhead, and then what I really want to see is how they close Brady Mountain boat ramp and build this barge and put a tugboat in going up Brady Mountain Road. And then they're going to float this thing 3 miles around the lake to our intake site, and they're going to do all this on the water. I'm going to rent a slip so I can go every day. And I'm gonna so I can watch this thing. The marine work is going to be I think, more impressive than the tunnel work.
Float and sink.
I'm sorry.
No. Any further questions? All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm excited. It's going to be great.
Have anybody, no one signed up for
No,
this?
sir.
Discussion amongst directors? Director, trustee?
Thank you. The trenchless method has to be used on Mazarn Creek. Is there any particular reason that we can float and sink 1,400 feet across the Lake Hamilton, and then we have to go trenchless? Did you say it was about 400 feet?
Yeah, 400 or 500.
400 or
Yes, sir.
500 feet?
Yeah, the float and sink requires water, and to do the project, we're going to do it when the drawdown is in the wintertime.
Okay,
So Mazarn Creek would be almost dry,
I see.
so we can't do the float and sink.
Can't do
There's another issue up there too, is the velocity of the water after a rainfall. When you
Oh,
get
yeah,
up-
it's
when you-
flashy.
When you get up to the area where we'll be crossing, you don't see boat docks or anything like that in that area for that particular part of the property. There were a couple, but they've washed off. So the velocity of the water after a rainfall comes down in such a flash flood manner in that big Mazarn that it could potentially bust the pipe with a rock, anything else that's coming down with that. So that was the biggest concern that we had with Entergy on why we needed to do the trench.
Okay. And those concrete chairs, how much do they weigh? How many tons do they?
Oh, yeah, they're large. I can't answer that question, but they're cubic yards of concrete.
Do they fit tight around that?
They do.
Right.
They put a band around it to hold them in place.
Okay, to hold them in place too.
And per Energy's requirements, we are a foot below, the pipe is a foot below the 9-foot drawdown.
Okay.
So normally the lake in Hamilton gets drawn 3 feet or 5 feet, but that's why we're digging the banks out on the shore, so we can go down and make sure we're 9 feet below the normal water line.
All right.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion amongst directors? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Resolution is adopted. Now we're going to return to item 3, which will be our annual comprehensive audit report. So at this time, we'll consider resolution R-22-125 and ask the city attorney to read by title.
Resolution R-22-125, a resolution acknowledging the review of the 2021 Annual Comprehensive Financial Audit Report. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
Director Dobbs Smith and Director Jones. Thank you. And the staff report will be provided by Karen Scott, Finance Director, and Mr. Gary Welch, the City Auditor. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. I apologize, we had a miscommunication about the start time, but Gary Welch with Alexander Thompson Arnold PLLC is here to present the 2021 Annual Comprehensive Financial Audit Report.
Welcome, Gary.
Good evening. I apologize. Just before I got here, number one, I've always thought this was a 7 o'clock. For the last 10 years, or 15 it was. But I had a partner who tested positive. Now, he worked in Benton all day, and I haven't seen him, but we will get through this. As Karen said, I'm Gary Welch, CPA with ATA, Alexander Thompson and Arnold. There was going to be some partners with me tonight, but we'll get by. This is the report. It is 180 or 190 pages long, and it is the most comprehensive report for the year that encompasses 2021. It is known as the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or commonly known as ACFR. And it reports all of the various funds of the city in the governmental sense and in the proprietary or business type reports. The report consists of 4 basic sections, and those sections are the introductory section. This is the city writes a beginning letter and tells about the history and some of the plans of the city. It introduces the staff and all of the administrative bodies of the city. The second section is the most used and useful section. It is 133 pages long. 63 of those pages are good reading in the note disclosure area. These notes give more details on assets, liabilities, capital assets, pensions. And it also gives our auditor's opinion on the overall financial statement on a combined basis. The third section is a statistical section. This is mostly the city's input on what has happened in this city for the last 10 years. It does a comparison of very things such as trends, revenue, debt, and demographics. The fourth section is an important section. It's generally called the single audit section, and it covers all of the federal and state programs. You had a pretty substantial increase in 2021 in the single audit section. There was receipts of $12.2 million and expenditures of $8.1 million. Most of these increases were in the transportation area, such as the airport, and in the ARPA program. There's also 3 additional auditor letters in this section, and they cover the federal and state grants and programs in the sense of compliance and in the sense of internal control. And we reported no instances or issues on non-compliances or deficiencies in control or weaknesses in control. Going to the first screen, that I'm going to go over some, briefly go over the highlights of this year and this report. This slide gives you a summary overview of the vital areas of the city. On the first, this states that the report and presentation are mandated by state law and encompass all cities in Arkansas of the first class. Next, there are 4 letters on, as I stated, there are opinion letters on page 3 of the report, and in the second paragraph we give our most important opinion. This is the opinion of the city overall, and it states that the numbers and accounts are fairly stated and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, known in my language. This is an unmodified opinion and sometimes referred to as a clean opinion. Next, we will review some numbers, and the first numbers that you see here, and I'm going to turn to my copy, is the overall citywide revenue increased 4.4 million, as you see on the first line. The expenses increased, but you had an overall revenue increase at the 109 million level shown in the left-hand column there. And that's an increase of 485,000 for the year over 2020. Now, the assets, liabilities, and net equity position are shown in the bottom part of that graph, and you see that your assets increased 4.6 million, your liabilities decreased at 3 million, and so that created a 7.7 million overall net position increase in 2021. Next, we break that down into governmental. Now, the governmental is your general fund, your police, fire, street, and about 20 other funds. In this area, you did increase assets, you did increase liabilities, but overall, your net position increased in the last column $663,000. Now, you see that negative net position, that is caused 5 years ago, and we've discussed it many times about the recording of the pension liability. We'll go over that a little bit more in a minute. Now, the better report on equity is in the business type. Now, business type is more of a user fee, and we call it proprietary or enterprise, or in this case, we're just referring to business type. That's your water, wastewater, solid waste, airport, stormwater, parking, etc. And here you see the assets, which are mostly your infrastructure assets, 437,000. They went down slightly, but that has a lot to do also with the pension computations. The liabilities went down 7.8. Now, that is primarily because of the normal bond payments, and the pension obligations actually decreased in this particular year. It had a lot to do with the asset values at the pension asset board level. And then, of course, you had operating results that are positive, and I'll go over that in just a minute. Now, the net change in capital assets, this increases annually, and you see you have increased in the last column $16,800,000. This is due to the construction projects that are always ongoing. If you look at the report, and let me see, I've got a page number here. That was page 56. There's a disclosure on constructions in progress, and there's some 34 million in accumulated construction cost, and as you know, that will continue to go up. Now, the next fund is the bonded debt. And here we actually have a $5,100,000 increase. And now that is because there are normal bond reduction payments, of course, but there was only one $10 million bond issue in 2021. That was the Waterworks refunding issue. And when you have a refunding issue, you're just trading liability for liability. The next slide is what we look at annually as a resolution which requires the general fund to carry a specific reserve. And we have looked at this for 4 to 5 years. The general fund balance increased significantly this year because of several reasons. There were revenue increases in taxes, gaming, and there was also a big difference in the capital outlay not happening in this particular year. It was budgeted for several million, but that did not get spent because of supply and other issues. So in this particular year, you have a very good result of your requirement. And next to the last number is $4,100,000, but the excess is $14 million over that amount. So your general fund did real well in 2021. It has an $18 million ending fund balance. Now, I know I'm going quick. Are there any questions to this point?
I think you're fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we see the business type: water, wastewater, solid waste, airport, stormwater, and parking. Now, 5 out of 6 here have a solid increase in net position. Net position is changed by revenue over expenses primarily, and that is $6.5 million increase in 2021. That's a $400,000 improvement over 2020. Annually, we have always looked we've looked at the pension requirement. Now, as I've said, this is annually adjusted by actuarial report, by the assets held by the pension boards, by the evaluation of said assets. And in this particular year, we had pension obligations decrease in the overall, in the last column, by $653,000. That was, and as I've always stated, pensions are a hard thing to get a handle on because they cover all present and past employees, and they compute pensions for all present and future payments. Now, in summary of this 190-page report, let me go over what I have just said. The first opinion is an unmodified audit opinion. The net position increased for both governmental and proprietary funds. Capital assets increased. Overall debt and pensions decreased. General fund meets and exceeds retention requirements. 5 out of the 6, and they're listed there, all had increases in net position. And the audit of the city's federal and state programs resulted in unmodified audit opinion with no significant deficiencies or instances of non-compliance. Now, I have one more requirement. If there's no questions, I will go over that. I have letters. It's called governance letters. Can you pass them out? These are what we call governance letters. They are required by our industry to go over these items for each and every audit And what they do is they tell you if we have any issues or problems within the audit function and whether or not we feel that the management has done the right things. For example, in the first section, and I'll go over these briefly, the management is responsible for all accounting policies and transactions recorded on an accurate and timely basis. And we found that to be true. There were no significant accounting policy changes. We also have to disclose the significant accounting estimates, and we identified 3. That was the allowance for doubtful accounts in the utility billing, and the pension and post-employment liabilities need to be identified and recorded, and the investment values have been valued and fairly recorded. And on those major estimates, we found that all these things had occurred timely and correctly. The next group of statements cover 3 areas. Did we encounter any difficulties during the audit? Was there any corrected or uncorrected misstatements? And did we have any disagreements with management? And we did not have difficulties in any of those areas. Lastly, the letter refers to a management rep letter we obtained, and I always like this one. Did management consult with other accountants? No, they did not. And did we have any other issues or findings? We found none. The remainder of the letter goes into some of our responsibility areas, and for example, in the statistical area, it is a presentation that is useful, but it is not part of the audit since it's all historical 10-year comparisons. It's done by the city finance department, but we have to tell you which parts we specifically don't audit. Are there any questions? I know this is a very quick review. If you want a detailed review, it'll take 3 or 4 hours, and I could do that, but you have to ask me.
Could we stop by your office and do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Just tell me when you're coming.
Director Garcia?
Thank you, Mayor. So there was no findings and no recommendations. Were there any exceptions that were cleared or any internal control recommendations that you had that we could get a copy of, or were there any?
No, there were not. We did not make any adjustments, which is kind of unusual. Sometimes we discuss changes need to be made with Doretha, and she does the changes, and we're not required to make the formal adjustment.
So we didn't have any recommendations there. And what is do you remember what the materiality threshold was?
I do not have that with me, but I can certainly send that to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions of Mr. Welch?
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify one thing. Gary, you mentioned the impact of pensions on your report. There are a couple of different types that we deal with. One is APRS, the other is lot fee, but there's a third that was the old closed local.
That is the closed fire and police, yes, that's in there. The lot fee is in there. The APRS covers all of the other city employees, and those are the main pension areas. And they each have a actuarial report that does 2 primary things. It gives the finance department the numbers. Probably the more important thing, it tells you how much you have to contribute as an annual contribution based on annual wages.
Yes.
Director Garcia?
Just clarification on that. What the city's part is the contribution and paying it in, but the city board has no authority over the pension plan itself, the state legislature has set that, and the management and the investments are all by the APERS and LOPV. So we have no authority over that other than we make sure we pay in what we have to pay in.
That is absolutely correct. It's not the best situation that you have such a liability with little control. The decrease in pension is always, the decrease in pension liability, it's always measured a year behind, and that particular year was a good market value year, so to speak. And so that's not an annual reduction.
And that's kind of leads me to my question, because you're saying it is a look back. So I guess sometime in 2023 or so, they'll look back or whatever. How far back are they looking? Because 2022 has not been necessarily a good year from an equity standpoint, and certainly with inflation and all, and now interest rates are rising, which, if you were in fixed income, you're getting a little bit more than you were, a year ago. But are we looking perhaps at a larger contribution next year?
That's possible. The conditions are, another problem, Director Garcia, is they can change the assumptions at the pension board level. That means we don't think we're going to earn 4%, we think we're going to earn 3%. So that pushes the liability up, those kind of things. So it is all driven by census data based on your number of employees, number of retirees, number of present employees, and how long the actuary thinks they're going to live after retirement. Those are all factors. And of course, the asset value is also a factor.
Very good. Any further questions? Thank you.
I wanted to thank Doretha, she's not here, and Ms. Scott, and certainly all the finance department. They are cooperative and do lend a lot of assistance.
Very good. Well, appreciate you, and excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody in the audience that want to speak on the audit? Any discussion amongst directors? Please call the roll.
Director Dobbs-Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee,
Aye.
Holliday,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Resolution is adopted. Now we'll jump back down to item 6, and we'll consider resolution R-22-128, and now it's the city attorney to read by title.
Resolution R-22-128, a resolution approving a substantial amendment to the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, fiscal year 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020 annual action plans to repurpose $249,958.31 in total funds and for other purposes. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Director
Second.
Jones, seconded by Director Trustee. And our staff report will be provided by Kathy Solomon, Planning and Development Director. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hey.
The City of Hot Springs was designated as a Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Community in 2003. And as an entitlement community, the city submits an annual action plan to HUD describing projects to be undertaken and exactly how those funds will be expended. When there are changes in priorities, expenditures, activities, purposes, location, beneficiaries, or grant funding that are part of the annual action plan, Title 24 of the Code of Federal Regulations requires that a substantial amendment be made to the annual action plan, in this case, multiple annual action plans from the years 2017, 18, 19, and 20. And this would be to reprogram $249,958.31 in unencumbered funds from projects that were completed under budget or that were canceled. And those funds are suggested to be used to provide rent and utility service cost burden relief for low and moderate income residents and limited clientele in response to the coronavirus pandemic. There is extensive citizen notice and participation required in the CDBG program, including any amendments to annual action plans. So the substantial amendment was made available for review and comment at cityhs.net in hard copy in the Planning and Development Office, electronically distributed to over 60 residents on the CDBG mailing list. That was done on July 5th. Citizens were notified of public discussions and comment opportunities by legal notices in the Sentinel Record newspaper on July 3rd and 10th. Online, again, via cityhs.net, a Community Development Advisory Committee public hearing, and a Hot Springs Board of Directors meeting previously this year. All those public meetings were advertised and included contact information to request accommodation should that be desired. This amendment will repurpose also 2020 CDBG CV funds, including $213,000 from the 2020 CV3 Quarantine Shelter Facility Project. And this is to aid the city in drawing down those 2020 CDBG CV funds before a portion of the funds must be returned to HUD on November 2nd, 2023. The city is required to draw down at least 80% of that funding. And should we not do that, a portion of the funds would be required to be returned to HUD. We don't want to do that. So we have a variety of projects, which all are listed in your packet and all have been advertised, that yield this savings of $249,958. And the proposal is to allocate those funds as follows. Rent emergency subsistence payments in the amount of $133,000. Utility emergency subsistence payments totaling $90,000. And 2 grassroots projects from our neighborhoods. One is community-based arts, Cut Well for Kids. And this is a partial funding to complete funding that was for the total amount that the applicant requested. This project fell right on the line in the 2022 funding projects. So part of the project was funded by 2022's money, and this $5,000 will complete funding that project in total. And the final project is Miss Ida's House of Care and Love Rehabilitation Phases 1 and 2. This too is a project that comes from the neighborhood and will provide care to 3 individuals needing enhanced services. It will be provided in a family setting, and that will total roughly $21,000. And so that is the total of nearly $250,000 that this project, this substantial amendment would fund if approved. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Sullivan? Director Garcia.
Just, I'm sorry, I forgot. Who is going to administer the rent and utility emergency funds?
That has not been determined at this time. We will use a competitive process as we did when we did this before, and expect to have the same type of standards and requirements for eligibility as were in place at that time.
So it would, but the minister would, they wouldn't come here. The applications for assistance would go like.
They will go to whomever we sign an agreement with to administer the funds.
Like United Way or Washington Behavior.
It could be an agency such as
Okay,
those.
a
Yes,
non-profit or agency.
yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any additional questions? Director Holliday.
I have a question, and I apologize, I didn't have copies of the applications again, since we had them digitally, but my question is actually a little bit for all of the nonprofits, but specifically because the two neighborhood projects are nonprofit, about the match. If these two do still carry the match requirement that we have for the city, and where that stands, and honestly, I can't remember if we require that to be shown in advance, and if so, or is it reimbursement?
That is shown at the time of application. Cutwell for Kids requested, and Community Development Advisory Committee approved, recommended to the board, and then the board accepted that recommendation that there be a waiver of the one-to-one match on the Cutwell for Kids. The Miss Itis House of Care and Love project, this is a startup. They have limited resources, but unlike many service-based requests that we've had in the past, Miss Itis House of Care and Love brings to the table equity in the structure that will be used to deliver the service. And this is a home in the neighborhood, which is being repurposed to be the site of Miss Ida's. So the Act Data Scout assessor information was used in determining that value, and that value is very close to what would be required to make that one-to-one match.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kathy. I was really happy to be part of that because I knew she was right at the end of the list. I call them ministers, both of them. I hope I don't ever have to go there, but if I do, that's one place I'd love to be able to go. And Minister, remember that I say that in case I can't talk.
Well, it's a super project. It will provide a home
Yes.
for people who need it in the neighborhood where they have lived their lives, and is a
That is wonderful.
type of a service that is not available at this time.
That's right.
Any additional questions for Ms. Sullivan? Thank you.
Thank you.
No one signed up to speak, and we'll have discussion amongst the board members. Any discussion amongst board members? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Director Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Resolution's adopted. We'll move on to Resolution R-22-129, and ask the city attorney to read by title.
Resolution R-22-129, a resolution authorizing an agreement for parking design and implementation services with Walker Consultants, amending the 2022 budget and for other purposes. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion, second to adopt.
Thank you. Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Director Garcia, seconded by
Second.
Director Dobbs Smith, and a staff report will be provided by Deputy City Manager Lance Spitzer. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This item comes to the board. Staff had issued a statement of qualifications to locate a parking vendor to help us in implementing the downtown parking project, and in doing so, we received 3 responses. We rated and ranked those responses, and Walker Consultants was the highest rated firm from staff's perspective. In doing so, we also negotiated a contract price for the scope of work that came in at $85,000. as part of their proposal, a few of the key points, I'll kind of touch on some of them. It's a 12-week process for the project, pretty compact. It's got multiple opportunities for stakeholder engagement, community involvement. There's also an online survey component, so you can really kind of reach the different facets. But really, a lot of it is going to depend on those stakeholders and those public engagement to really help determine how those end users interact with our parking program downtown. Just kind of some high-level figures. I think you saw Mr. Welch's in his review, the parking fund in itself. The vast majority of those is the depreciation of the parking garage. We've got about 275 meters in the downtown, old coin-style operated meters. Generally, from a revenue perspective, you're looking at approximately 95 to maybe 110,000 in revenue that the parking fund brings in at a very minimal management, very minimal participation from a paid parking perspective. So what the goal of this particular project is, and with Walker's assistance, is to help us develop this paid parking program for downtown. Hot Springs is developed. We have some topographical attributes that make parking in and around the downtown somewhat difficult, but those same attributes, obviously, with a national park that has record visitors, Bathhouse Row, our downtown shops, and many things with Convention Center and so on, we really have a tremendously high visitor load. And with that, parking is obviously an asset. It's one thing that contributes to economic development, because people don't go somewhere for the sole purpose of parking, going somewhere to do something. Obviously, Hot Springs has lots to do. So with this project, we really hope that we will manage the asset of parking. And in doing that, we really look forward to having Walker Consultants help us in that process and take the input from those stakeholders, but also to help us in drafting a request for proposals to bring forth the hardware and software that need to be procured. When we wrote the statement of qualifications, we were very deliberate. We did not want to have a vendor that sold, marketed, installed, managed parking. We wanted to have a partner in this process to help us develop this parking program. And we've got that with Walker. Main thing is that we carry this forward to implementation, because Hot Springs has had multiple studies with parking over the years, and obviously we've never taken it to an implementation phase. That's what this is. Really a couple highlights of their proposal, the statement of work. They will assist us in locating identifying additional parking assets. So if there does need to be additional parking facilities constructed, that's a component of it. They'll help us in determining parking rates. And really, when you're talking about parking, there's a lot that goes into it. It seems pretty simplistic, but it's an entire field of study. You're talking about walking distances from parking facilities, and really you have to take all of that into account, because this will be on-street, off-street parking lots, the parking structures that we have. Public parking, when you compare it to privately held parking, obviously public is in the minority of that. Most of the parking downtown is, in fact, privately held. So one of the components of our statement of work was to help us develop an employee permit parking program, because that is one of probably the larger issues that we run into, is we have a good number of employees trying to jostle with our merchants and also those coming to visit downtown. So it's a full service project, but like I said, it's a 12-week process, and we really look forward to moving this one forward, because it's been a long time coming, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Any questions of the board to Lance? Director Garcia.
So a big portion of this will be the software, and to make it as easy as possible, with technology that's currently available. This is not a study. There was some misunderstanding on that before. I heard from some employees as well as downtown merchants this afternoon, and they understand the need. The employees were most concerned because currently they do not pay in the parking garage or other parking that they're utilizing, and they were very concerned about the timing of when this would come into implementation, go live, for paying and how that would be. But the employees will, if understood, part of this process, they will have input. And on our goals setting on August 6th, we said that this was something that would be completed. The date we had was over a year from now. So it's going to be a year or till December of 23 before the paid portion would be live, most likely, after.
We actually look for, obviously the study in itself will be about 12 weeks. As part of, during that process, they will assist us in drafting those specifications for the hardware and software. We will really look to have that happening and being issued later in 2022 toward the end of the year, and hopefully have an award and begin that process, because obviously anything dealing with component circuitry, things of that nature, when you're talking about computerized anything, electronics, those are things that they're impacted by supply chain issues.
The lead time.
Yeah, so hopefully we can get that done in 2022 and then move into 2023 into that implementation phase.
But we wouldn't have delivery until 2023.
Correct.
And everything.
If everything went well, yeah, that would 2023 certainly.
Our goal is to have it implemented by December 2023, sometime within that time frame.
So they would have a year, but we are going to consider the employees' needs as part of this to either have consideration for on what they could pay or not, depending where they could park.
Lance had written into the SOQ specific stakeholder meetings that would include business owners, merchants, employees. There'll be several of those meetings prior to any final report coming back with recommendations.
So I just wanted the public, and particularly those downtown employees and merchants, that the lead time of this starts now or upon approval, but the go live is by the end of 2023 if all goes well and employees are going to be considered.
Definitely. We're downtown with having visitors is great, but if you don't have employees that are able to park and get to work, you've kind of defeated the purpose.
Right.
So that was really one of the components that we impressed us about Walker, is they've developed these employee parking programs across the state across the country. So that was something that was very significant in our decision.
Thank you.
Any additional, Director Trustee?
Lance, we're going to have it hopefully fully implemented by the end of the year, but this will be implemented in phases, I suppose. It won't be one day we'll flip the switch and it'll all go live. It'll be implemented as certain areas have the equipment and all to be installed, and it would go live at that time.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Phase project.
All right.
But that'll come back to the board after this 12, yeah.
Very much.
Any additional questions of Lance? Thank you. No one sign up?
No, sir.
Discussion amongst directors? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Resolution's adopted. Our final two action items of this evening are both ordinances, so we'll begin with Ordinance O-22-36, and I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules to read by title only.
So moved.
Director Holliday, seconded
Second.
by Director Dobbs Smith. We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Please.
Ordinance 022-36, an ordinance adopting the 2022 Hot Springs Mechanical Code, repealing certain ordinances and for other purposes. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt and have discussion.
Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Director Jones, seconded by Director Trustee, and Mr. Mike Scott, Chief Building Official, will provide the staff report. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor. Effective July 1st, 2022, the Arkansas Heating, Ventilation, Air Conditioning, and Refrigeration Board adopted the most current edition of the International Mechanical Code, and that is the 2021 version. It is our desire at the city to adopt the most current code and stay current with these codes. We did increase the fees slightly, is what I'm asking for on this. If you'd like a breakdown of that, overall cost on a 2,000 square foot house, it would, between the building permit fees, the mechanical permit fees, electrical permit fees, plumbing permit fees, and gas fees, it's a 0.17% of the overall cost of the house. That's how slight it is. It's very small. Currently, the fees for those that I just mentioned are 0.62% of the overall cost of a house, and they'll go up to 0.79%. So all that's less than 1% for the permit fees for a house in City of Hot Springs.
Any questions to Mr. Scott? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody sign up?
No, sir.
Nobody signed up. Any discussion amongst directors? Please call the roll.
Director Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. The final action of the evening is to consider ordinance O-22-37, and I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules to read by title only.
So moved.
Director Trustee, seconded by
Second.
Director Holliday. Thank you. We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules to read by title only. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Please read by title.
Ordinance O-22-37, an ordinance adopting the 2022 Hot Springs Electrical Code, repealing certain ordinances and for other purposes. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt and have discussion, if any.
Director Trustee,
So moved.
seconded by
Second.
Director Holliday. And again, Chief Building Official, Mr. Mike Scott, will provide the staff report.
Thank you. Currently, the city is under the 2017 National Electric Code. There's a 2020 version of the National Electric Code, and it is our desire to adopt the most current code to stay current with any technology and materials and things. Anyway, the same fees increase we're asking for on electrical as we did for plumbing and mechanical. So, is there any other questions?
Director
Yes, sir.
Weatherford?
Is there any major changes to?
There's not. I mean, we do an ISO report every 5 years, and we get hit pretty hard because our current mechanical code is the 2010 edition. Our current plumbing code that you guys just adopted a few weeks ago is the 2006 edition. So by adopting all these codes, we'll be within the less than 5-year period, so we'll get full points for that ISO report. So that's why it's important for us also to stay with this. But also the other reason is just to stay current with technology. As you know, electrical, all these arc fault breakers coming out and everything. But on this one, there's actually not anything major. That was, the 2017 edition did have a lot of major changes as arc faults and things like that.
That one caught me.
That was pretty costly to everybody I know, but this one doesn't have that because they've already came out with pretty much everything.
Yeah, now you can't get those breakers.
Supply chain is a problem, yes, sir. Yeah.
GFI receptacles, so.
I hear that every day. We work with the contractors to try to expedite their projects and get them done, so.
That's what I was worried about. It wasn't something that wasn't gonna catch me in the. Tennis ball.
Nothing new like that on residential, nothing at all.
Thank you.
Just
Director Garcia?
clarify for the public, the ISO, when you said that.
It's
this
Insurance Services Organization that
Right,
does
and
that.
so that helps,
Yeah.
the lower our ISO,
Well,
the lower our insurance could be.
It's more affected by the fire department as an ISO rating.
Right.
And the building department has a separate ISO rating. Currently, the insurance companies don't look at ours as hard as they do the fire department. I have called around wondering why, you know, I'm a building guy. I want mine to count too. You know, so,
Agreed.
but they don't look at it as much, but, you know, they said that they could at any time, and so we'd like to keep our number low. So,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions of Mr. Scott? Thank you. No one signed up to speak on this. Any discussion amongst directors? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Director Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. That completes the action items of the board for this evening. Are there any board or directors' items for discussion? Any, Director Garcia?
Mayor, thank you. I wanted to mention to you and the board, I'd made an inquiry into the cost of lighting at the entrance and exits of the Expressway. For a number of years, we've been making a request to the Arkansas Department of Transportation because that is a part of their responsibilities, but we still do not have any lighting there. And I've received complaints regarding the safety and how dark it can be in those. And hopefully the Department of Transportation for Arkansas will be able to step up and take care of that. But I wanted to also see what maybe we could partner with, not probably at all at one time, but at least start something, because if we save one life, it's going to be worth it. But we've had annually for the past few years, someone's gotten on the Expressway going in the wrong direction and had fatalities, and we don't want any more accidents or fatalities. So I don't know what, it may be astronomical. I don't know till we get that information.
Thank you. Any other directors' items for discussion? Just want to have a little shout out to an organization that put on a resource fair this past weekend on Saturday at Farmers Market. And Hot Springs Community Resource Fair in conjunction with Barbara Coleman Back to School Bash and Samaritan's Feet Ministry. The theme was diversity and inclusion. Equals unity. The difference makers put that on and had a lot of good activities there where healthcare and service organizations set up tents in the shade tree area of the Greenway Park there, adjacent to Farmers Market. We had an excellent speaker on diversity, Vice Chancellor at UAMS, Dr. Brian Gittins. He provided a very strong message on diversity and equity and inclusion. Many other activities, and it shouldn't go without mention that our very own police department again manned the grill and refreshments and the hot seat at the location, even though it was about 95 degrees out during the time of the event, was our very own Chief Chapman and Assistant Chief Harverton. They were on the grill station for several hours and making the hot dogs. So we appreciate them and the entire police department that volunteered and provided their support and interacted with a very diverse community. I've had a number of people come up to me during that event and expressed amazement and appreciation for the varied groups that were there and involved in coming together to for, like I say, the health fair and the message on diversity and the many other activities that were going on. So thank you to the police department for their involvement and the difference makers, Willie Wade and Esther Dixon, that head that up. So any further comments?
No, I thought that was a good report that you gave. I was gonna give it, but I wasn't there, so I couldn't tell it all. But that's gonna help you when it comes time for them folks.
Well, we're just about, we appreciate these nonprofits that do work together, and they do it out of love, and they certainly don't do it because there's money involved. So I want to thank them again. So
I think that was the fourth one for the day for Chief and his staff. I think you had a couple Friday and a couple Saturday, didn't you?
yeah. Okay, any further items? Hearing none, Director Jones?
Well, I'm ready. I'm sure everybody else is. And it's 24 minutes after 7, and I move that we adjourn for the night of this meeting.
Very
Second.
good. We got a second? Director Holliday, I think, said the second. Oh, we need a second.
Garcia.
Director Garcia, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Be safe.
Second.